Namaste, one and all. I welcome all of you on behalf of Think India Pune and Think India Mumbai. Today we have a very distinguished guest with us, Sri Rajiv Malhotra, who perhaps needs no introduction. So we are honored to have you today. Today, sir will be speaking with us on artificial intelligence and future of power, which is indeed a very different, very interesting, and still a very relevant topic to discuss. Before starting with the talk, I would just like to give a short introduction of Think India. Think India is a student organization consisting of students from various national institutions like IITs, IIMs, IISCs, NLUs, and it aims to inculcate a nation first attitude among students, bring them together, and motivate them to work towards nation building. During this pandemic, we also organized a lot of debates, lot of article writing competition, lot of live sessions, and made sure that students utilize this time to learn and to increase their knowledge. Now, without any further ado, I would request Mr. Rajiv Malhotra to share his thoughts on this very interesting topic, artificial intelligence and future of power. So, please.
Thank you very much for inviting me. This book has been in research for 5 years. And unlike many of my other books, when I start talking about it in the final stages, in this case, I decided to keep completely quiet. I decided that I will not speak about it. I did give a few hints because I talked about digital colonization in the last 3-4 years. I didn't talk much about the book though. And I gave a talk in Valley of Words, Dehradun in 2019. Luckily, we had the raw footage and we did not put it up because the reaction from the audience was so strong and so intense, and they were so moved by it that I decided it would be a bad idea to leak it out before the book comes out. So the same literary festival invited me in 2020, just a couple of months ago, to again be a keynote speaker, and that's when I openly talked about the book for the first time. So the background I have is that at the age of 20, I came to the United States to do my PhD in physics, but I switched to computer science. And that has a lot to do with AI. My specialty was AI, and I won't go into my own life story, but several things happened in physics and computer science that had to do with AI. And so I switched to the computer science department, and then I pursued a career in the computer field. I worked in the software field, in the mainframe industry for a long time, then in the telecom industry, then in the information services industry before it was called information services. I was using the internet before it was called internet. It used to be called ARPANET, and before that it was called DARPANET. So when people say, oh, this guy talks about using a technology even before it existed, the point is that many technologies do exist and certain people get to use them before they become public. Same thing happened with Wikipedia, So anyway, I was using some of these technologies before they became public. In the career in ITT, where I was a corporate vice president, we had a lot of technology for the U.S. Department of Defense. The U.S. Department of Defense actually pioneered so much research, which then becomes commercial. First, it's classified for military use only. For instance, we invented our company had a lot of work patents in the original research on fiber optics, and a gentleman whose office was adjacent to mine, a Chinese American, got the Nobel Prize several years later for fiber optics. That's the time when Bell Labs was inventing the transistor and semiconductors, also for the Department of Defense. We were inventing speech, which is now very common. When you speak to Siri and Siri understands you, that speech recognition was actually a Department of Defense project a long time ago. So my background and career in this topic is way back. But 25, 26 years ago, I quit all that to start my foundation and get into what is called humanities and social sciences, where I have no training. My training is entirely in hard sciences and computer science and things like that. but for most of my adult life, I put that aside and started writing and engaging in issues of Dharma and breaking India forces, the political, geopolitical forces, the liberal arts, the social sciences. Those became very important to me. So I brought a discipline and a kind of thinking that is typical of scientists, into this arena. And sometimes I cannot understand their approaches, and they cannot understand mine. So that's what makes an interesting encounter. Now, you might wonder, well, okay, so since I kind of left the technology field and got into humanities and social sciences and geopolitics and dharma and spiritual tradition and so on, then why write this book on AI, which actually goes back to my earlier background? And the answer is that I don't discuss in this book particularly because it's already a 500-page book. There's a lot more material I have which I'll publish later. But certain things started happening 5 years ago that troubled me. Things started happening in AI, and I started quietly investigating. And these things have a huge impact on the world, United States and everywhere else, but especially India. When I started this book, I gave it to some experts. I brought in some editors, to sort of help clean it up and so on, and give me a feedback, which I do with all my books. So many of the Americans, and I didn't have anybody in India involved, so many of the Americans said, you should write this book on America because all this is affecting America. And too much focus on India, you don't need that. And I did think of removing the India as my case study and putting in USA as a case study. But I will do that in a separate book. I do plan on doing that in a separate book. But in this book, part one, which is 70% of the book, is universal, how AI is affecting society. Part two of the book, which is 30%, is on India as a case study. So I focus on that. And I give reasons why India will be particularly affected because of its large population, underemployment, undereducation, a lot of fragmentation, infighting, and most of all, India lost the lead to China. And I give reasons why I'm very upset and concerned that the software industry, which was at one time considered, India as a superpower in software, lost the lead to China in AI. And AI is software. So how come India as a software superpower, did not keep that lead and become an AI superpower? And why is India behind USA and China in AI? In fact, if you look at the statistics, India is not in the top 10 in the world in terms of investments in AI, in terms of patents in AI. A lot of Indians in their personal capacity are at the top of AI, but they're working for American companies. Some of the brightest leave India and go to USA, and they work for American companies in tremendously, important positions. But they are not making technology for India. They're making technology for US. Those who are in India and working in AI, the vast majority of patents being filed in India on AI and related technologies also are by people like Microsoft India, people like Google India. So again, it's the owner of the patent is not India, but somebody else who set up a base in India. And by the way, when I talk about artificial intelligence, it's not only the limited thing, technically limited AI area. I'm talking about augmented reality. I'm talking about the neuroscience, interventions by AI. I'm talking about drones, robotic soldiers that are driven by AI, facial recognition, speech recognition, handwriting recognition. I'm talking about the hacking of your mind through social media. I'm talking about the spiritual dimensions, which are very serious. So I'm looking at a whole lot of technologies. Quantum computing. Actually, when I left the tech world and started Infinity Foundation, some of the early grants we gave were for conceptualizing quantum computing, because I saw a kind of a Vedanta, role in quantum computing. And so we funded some work in quantum computing in the mid 90s at a time when people thought it's science fiction. Well, today, the US and China are in a race for quantum computing. Whoever builds the quantum computer first, and this will happen sometime later in this decade, somebody will be able to do that because a lot of milestones have been achieved, a lot of initial preliminary work has been done, and the race is on. Whoever builds the first quantum computer will be able to break all security codes, will be able to hack all the encryption, all the passwords instantly. With one click, you'll get into any network. And so imagine how much hacking would happen. Imagine all your energy grid, your electricity grid, your defense grid, all of that completely hacked. Imagine a missile is coming towards you from an enemy, and you are able to hack into its encryption and give it instructions to U-turn and go back where it came from and blow up. Imagine the danger, what would happen to the entire missile network of a country if the enemy could just reverse the direction of the missiles by hacking into their information. That's the kind of catastrophe that quantum computing will bring. Now, USA had a clear lead in quantum computing, but China did some beg, borrow, steal. They have this approach to take other people's ideas, and US is very upset. I mean, that's the one thing I agreed with Trump on, his China policy, that China was not playing fair, which until he blew the whistle, people were tolerating it. They were putting up with China for whatever foolish reason. But anyway, a large part of the US trade war with China has to do with AI. It has to do with the US military understanding that China has taken away, gotten an advantage, taken a lot of intellectual property and turned it into weapons. China has drones, robotic soldiers. Recently, there was an article in India, in which the Indian military said that one of the problems they faced in the line of actual control in Ladakh was China used, I think they said, unconventional methods, but they did not elaborate what that means. I would like to understand what were those unconventional methods that they started using. New technologies, new strange things. But I don't know whether China has started deploying AI on the border yet, but it certainly will. China is certainly developing drones which are going to be able to go under the radar, be able to have facial recognition, identify a particular target, particular individual as a target, shoot that person, or drop weapons quietly in the middle of the night for terrorists to pick up. So all this technology, it will export to Pakistan. The Pakistan-China axis is very dangerous, and I don't think enough people recognize it enough. I'm sure the security people in India understand all this. I know a few defense people who understand all this. But the use of AI for weaponry, for fighting wars, is something of concern to USA, the way China has suddenly leapfrogged ahead. Also, I read a couple of weeks ago, the Indian and US Navy detected 12 driverless or unmanned Chinese submarines, 12 in the Indian Ocean. And these are very slow. They don't look like normal submarines. They're like a glider, and they just slowly go under the water, and they're gathering data. They're surveillance. So what they're doing is going without being visible, because they're very quiet. They're going around the Indian coastline, and they're going around various places in the Indian Ocean, mapping, building an undersea map of the terrain, so that if they want to attack, they know what's where, who's where, what the trade routes are, where Indian ships are parked, and where the submarines are parked, and all of that stuff, and where you can hide and all that. So these submarines, they're called undersea unmanned submarine gliders. They're called gliders, and there's 12 of them. Now they plan to put out 14, but they managed to put out 12, which is pretty bad for India. But I am told that very soon they will have 100, and in the next few years they'll have 1,000 in the Indian Ocean. So they literally just have their presence under the ocean, all over the place, gathering data, And this AI is able to give them not only facial recognition, you can count the number of tanks, the number of ships, you can count the speed at which things are moving, you can count the number of soldiers from a satellite picture automatically without human beings having to interpret the pictures. So with satellite imagery or with underwater imagery, you can keep track of very, very minute details of what the other side is doing, and be able to surprise them. This is the next frontier for terrorists. Imagine a little drone which could be like this big, and which has a little camera and one bullet, boom, it can shoot, and it goes into a cricket stadium somewhere or some kind of a public gathering. Very quietly, it goes around and is looking for one person. Suppose suppose they have said, look for this individual's face, and there is facial recognition, and shoot him. So now what do? How do you protect from that? How do you find such a drone? And the enemy could have hundreds of them. They're little ones. They're not easy to find. And even if you found one, you shoot it down, fine. It doesn't matter. There's no human being involved. They have hundreds of them. So mass producing these on a scale unprecedented is going to happen. And China has a lead on this. US is planning a 1 lakh drone air force, which means there'll be an air force with 1 lakh drones. 1 lakh these people, these fighter jets and all that, without human pilots necessary. And if you have so many of them, and then they're collapsible, so they can collapse into a suitcase, and the pilot, a human pilot, can eject, while he's fighting, he can eject these pilotless drones out of his plane, and they can go helping him. They can distract the enemy. They can shoot, have some ability to shoot the enemy. They can divert the radars of the enemy. They can do all sorts of things. Imagine the Himalayan war where there is robots, not just humans, and lots of them. And they are better than human beings at potholes, at winter weather. They don't need food. They are disposable. I mean, if they are finished, they're finished. US has been working on, driverless vehicles in Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, testing these quite well. Initially to detect bombs and defuse bombs so that a human being is not put in danger, but then also driverless tanks, driverless trucks. So this business of the impact of AI is so huge that there is nothing which is going to be spared. It is as fundamental as the Industrial Revolution in Britain, which created the whole new world system. And so AI will create a new world system. And USA and China are at the forefront of this. And I'm concerned that USA and China are also colonial powers, both of them. I've also had off-camera private discussions with US national security people, with some of them retired, some of them very active. So this is a topic, AI is a very important topic for national security. So this is battleground number 2. My book talks about 5 battlegrounds. So this defense and China and what's happening with all these AI interventions for the Navy, Air Force, Army, how it's going to disrupt all of that, how it's going to make today's military obsolete. Today's military will be like, somebody with bows and arrows facing an army of tanks. It'll be like that when people get weaponized with AI, which is happening during this decade. It's already starting to happen. Battleground 1 is economics. It has to do with jobs. It has to do with education. Is India ready? How did India lose its software lead? And is India going to do the same with AI? And when you look at, there was a report by, I've read all these reports from Price Waterhouse, Ernst & Young, McKinsey, World Economic Forum, Oxford Economics, all kinds of people have been writing reports internationally. And in India, FICCI, CII, the Niti Aayog, I've read all the reports. So I'm quite well, informed about what's going on. The concern is that India woke up very little and very late after China took this lead in a very big way. When you go to international conferences, you will find the largest contingent of AI experts and papers come from China most of the time. and US neck to neck, but sometimes more China. There are a large number of Indians in their personal capacity working for non-Indian companies. There are a lot of Indians. But Indian companies, Indian establishments are very few. There was one in the most recent one. It was earlier in 2020, just before COVID hit. I think it was February or somewhere around there, before everything got clamped down due to COVID. And there was one in New York, a very large number of people, a couple of thousand papers, and people attending remotely also. There were just 5 or 6 people from India, and those also not in the main auditorium, not presenting any major paper, but just doing posters. People from IIT Bombay, people of stature and substance, just coming and in a very junior capacity. It was very saddening. There were many other Indians, but they're working for Microsoft or Google or Facebook or something. I know some people who work for Amazon in AI. I know several people in Facebook and Microsoft in AI. A lot of people in Netflix. So the India has turned itself into supplying labor. Lead India had in software was lost. This is not a problem of one government or another. The problem is when you raise an issue, people should not blame. We should figure out what to do. Everybody is concerned. We should figure out constructively what to do. These problems have happened over 70 years. You can track it. In this book, I look at the rise of China. Their education policy several generations ago during President Deng, universal education, which India still doesn't have, and practical education. And today the Chinese, when you meet a Chinese person, his parents are well educated, his grandparents are well educated. Most of them are third generation educated people. That is not true for Indians. Now, so the investments that they made were long term, and they're paying off. China invested multi-billion-dollar funding of so many technologies. They are the number one in solar power. They have more robots than anybody else does. I mean, there are so many leading edge technologies, semiconductors. They're getting into semiconductors right now. They are not the number one. They're not close to number one, but they want to be. So if you look at AI is a cluster of technologies, and AI is sort of the brains with all these technologies around it. And I mentioned quantum computing, I mentioned drones, I mentioned speech recognition, video, face recognition, robotics, and so on. There's a whole lot of fields that are all collectively coming under AI, augmented reality, virtual reality. So India is not even in the top 10. There's a report where they project that the future, the PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is an American company, projects that by 2030, $16 trillion of world economy will be created due to AI. $16 trillion of new economy will be created because of AI. And they're predicting that the largest chunk of this will go to China, almost half. And the next will be USA, quite a large part. Between USA and China, about 75-80% of the whole market share of AI is gone. And then there are others like, EU countries, Japan, Russia, Israel, and so on. India is listed as rest of the world. Rest of the world all combined about 2-3%. India is part of that. So we are nowhere close to where India deserves to be and ought to be and needs to be in this technology. And this technology is going to be a game changer. And we have not woken up. When organizations like yours, Think India, invite me, they want me to talk about some breaking India, Hindu phobia, all that is great stuff. And when I say I want to talk about artificial intelligence, they say, sir, we'll do that some other time. But, right now our people want to talk about this. So, a large part of my book talks about the obsolescence of Hindu intellectualism. And I'm glad Conrad is listening because he's a dear friend also. But I want to talk about this separately with people like Conrad, that I need to educate through this book. I want to educate the whole Hindu intellectual cabal. All of these guys, my earlier books a decade ago, Breaking India was groundbreaking, And Being Different was groundbreaking. A lot of these books were. And they were considered pioneers because they shook up people and they argued things that people were not thinking of at the time. And so the past decade, the discourse of Hindus in the public has been largely shaped by the ideas in Breaking India and Being Different. A whole lot of other books and people are derivatives of that. This whole urban Naxal is an offshoot of Breaking India. The whole fight against sameness and the whole fight against evangelism and this whole fight against Hindu phobia. All of these things are the basic premises, and the basic framework was put out a decade ago in these two books. And I've been talking about them for 20 years. So, what happened is a whole lot of Hindus jumped on the bandwagon, thanked me a lot. At first, they were very grateful to me. Then they started sidelining me and bypassing me. And now they have gone way ahead on their own, don't even recognize me. In fact, I'm not even invited, sometimes not even welcome. And some of them like to just hit out also, not realizing that the very platform and framework they're standing on, I had a lot to do with bringing that out. Okay, so we should be working together. We should be working as colleagues and collaborators. But there is this tendency in India, use somebody, dump him, go ahead and try to pretend it's your own. That sort of, that jugaad, lack of ethics, lack of dharma is costing us. Because what has now happened, this new book of mine shows, is that whole cabal, that whole group of public intellectuals who are into these manthans and literary festivals and big shots on social media with their own channels and all that. Basically, as far as AI is concerned, they're obsolete. They have zero knowledge. They are nowhere to be found. This is not even part of the topic. They don't even understand. It has not hit the standard people talking about whether it is Sonia Gandhi or Chidambaram or Donald Trump or Pakistan or CAA or some mandir, some new thing happening. All those are very important points. But those are the things I talked about 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And now I'm moving on to what the topics will be in the next 10 years. My book is the defining book for the discourse for the next 10 years. I can promise you that. And people will jump on this bandwagon. The honest ones will admit where they got it from, where they got the knowledge from, who pioneered it, and they'll try to include me, and we can work together, because I also plan 4 or 5 other books on this theme. And many conferences. We'll do AI conferences like we've done Swadeshi Indology conferences. And I want to take a lot of partners and collaborators with me into the future, educate them on AI, bring them on board, and create a whole new mobilization. That's what I want to do. But my closing remark is that the Hindu activists and intellectuals, whether they are political people, whether they are gurus, whether they are these public intellectuals who are experts who are on the air all the time in Twitter, they have a lot of followings, or I've talked to some of them privately, by the way. They tell me, listen, we don't know what this AI is. We don't know why it's important. We don't know why it's important, they tell me. So I tell them that, do you know that as many as 500 million Indians at the lower end of the social economic strata are going to be obsolete as far as being able to get a job? This is very serious. India's investments in AI are very top down. Big corporate people making investments, they'll get even richer, perhaps, maybe. But 90% of Indian workers don't work for big corporate India. They don't work for the Sensex companies. They don't. Those Sensex companies employ maybe 5, 6, 7% of the total workforce in India. Most of them are small, medium-sized, or self-employed, independent, that kind of people. What happens to them? Who's going to look after them? So the takeaway I want from you is that India needs to wake up. India needs to shake up. The usual leaders who've been telling you what's going on in Breaking India and Maoists doing this, evangelists doing this, Islamists doing this, all these forces doing it. They are not the ones who are equipped at all in this new warfare, in this new era from 2020 to 2030, the new decade. This decade is going to be defined by things I've talked about in this book. So I think if you want to be at the cutting edge of where the discussion is going to be, you better read this book. I'm not just saying it because I've written it, but because people who are in the AI field, who've written many books, they themselves have told me there isn't another book which covers all of these all of so much breadth and explains the impact of AI for a common person who is not an AI expert. My book is written for people who are not technocrats, who are not AI experts. I'm trying my best to educate them, inform them, and I've organized into 5 battlegrounds so that if you are a defense expert, you just go and listen to read this battleground number 2. If you're into economics and jobs and things like that, you worry about battleground number 1. If you are concerned about the future of social media hacking us and trying to navigate and mold us in a certain direction and brainwash us, then it's battleground number 3. So like that, I've organized it. These battlegrounds are not separate from each other. Of course, they're all related to each other. And the purpose of this is to get young people like you on board. And the book is dedicated to the scientists, technocrats, the youth leaders. They are the ones who can save humanity and save the country. AI is a tremendous force for good, like industrial revolution was, like nuclear energy. So many things are. And it's also a tremendous force that will result in inequalities because the benefits will not be equally shared. Some people will get more benefits than others. There will be a new colonization. There will be new disempowered people, haves and have-nots, a new caste system, because of huge masses of humanity becoming disempowered. So you have to take it seriously. With that, I will stop. And Mrinmay, you should now take control and give me some questions to answer. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, sir. It was indeed a very enlightening talk for all of us. And I just went through your book preview before preparing for this session. And that quote that you have quoted from Ramayana, I think that, now people should know the truth, even if it is bitter or even if it is, even if it is going to be a bit painful. Now we should accept, should start working towards a solution. So, and I would also like to tell you so that a lot of, in fact, computer science students, startup entrepreneurs had registered for this talk. And I'm sure that they have, they're inspired and they are, this has been an eye opener for all of them. Akshara Venkatesh is asking, what is the scope of having a separate ministry and center to each state level government organization to focus on AI?
Okay, so I propose that just like we have ISRO for space and Bhabha Atomic Research for atomic energy, I am proposing that India needs similar large-scale institution and funding for AI. And related technologies, quantum computing, semiconductors, fundamentals, aerospace for fundamental, these recognition of whether it's speech or handwriting or images, faces, all of that, natural language processing. We need something like GPT-3, which is people who are in computer science probably know that. We need something like Watson, IBM's Watson, these are huge AI projects that are in the US. We don't have a single project like that in India. So to do large projects, we need the government. We need the government to fund it. Right now, there are chota mota projects in this IIT or that IIT, 5 people doing here or there. That won't cut it. And much of what we call in our own AI is not developing new original technologies. Those are projects where we are implementing ideas that already exist somewhere else. And we are sort of a few years behind in implementing them. So I would like, first of all, the central government should start an AI commission. I would give them a huge amount of money. Niti Aayog is just a think tank, and I imagine the following. I sent an invite to Niti Aayog to when I'm writing this book that I in fact invited them to host the launch of the book. I wanted them to be included in all this. No response, no interest. And so, the biggest disappointment, some of India's top economists, I won't name them, household names, they're in the public media all the time, making economic stuff and all that. They're well-known people in Indian economics. When I talked to them about AI, zero knowledge. One of them showed that he thought this is sort of long-term science fiction, He couldn't believe some of these things I was saying. He said, I don't believe that only this is possible. And then one of them said, look, I'll pass it on to some colleague of mine who might be interested. He's some big official, but I'm an economist. I don't think of these things. So I said to him, you're an economist and you're not interested in AI. Come on. It's like during the Industrial Revolution of Britain. Imagine if there was an economist saying, I'm not interested in the Industrial Revolution. I am an economist. The point is the Industrial Revolution changed world economics forever. It was the future of world economics. And any economist worth his salt today has to be very concerned and very knowledgeable about AI. And the ones who are not should be just not even given any respect because they're obsolete. So I'm finding obsolescence across Indian society.
RKK is asking, what are the geopolitical alliances, international geopolitical alliances that India should or must take up in terms of AI partnerships, may it be in research or in industry?
So we have to have tangible, concrete products, which are world scale. And people like Reliance should get into it. People like Tata should get into it. People like TCS and Infosys, they should all get into these things. And we need a visionary to put it all together. Alliances overseas, yes, but what about alliances in India? Right now, the Indian defense don't have much alliances with the industry and don't have much alliance with academics. In the United States, there is the military, industrial, academic complex. General Eisenhower coined the term military industrial complex. I'm adding the word academic to it. And I'm saying that the United States, one of the reasons it's strong is because of its military industrial academic complex. When I was 20 years old, a student in graduate school in this country, my professor had grants from the Pentagon and all kinds of government grants, defense grants. And so I had to get security clearance because we had to visit Pentagon in Washington, D.C. It was so exciting. Imagine a young fellow, early 20s, and he's so excited that he's part of some project because his professors got this grant. And so, you get inspired. You are very practical in your thinking. You're not just doing some theories. So you will find most good universities, the leading professors got defense contracts and they got industry contracts. If you are a graduate student and you are smart, you'll get to be one of these contracts and become a research assistant or something. And then, you will find that your career is laid out and you'll really get ahead. We don't have that in India. In India, the universities are mainly teaching and sometimes not even teaching, mostly politics and nonsense like that, and about identity politics and, hardly any quality research projects aligned with national interests, not on a big scale. You will find every time I say this, some IIT guy somewhere says, no, I do this work with so-and-so in the government, and I've got 2 graduate students working for me, but that's not going to cut it. You need huge scale, and you need very long-term bets. India needs to make billion-dollar bets on some of these long-term projects. That's what India needs in order to catch up.
Thank you, sir. Vinaya Gokuldas is asking, how can we engage small towns and Indian values in the development and ethics of AI? Because he believes ethics in AI will play a big role for the future.
Brilliant question. These people who ask these questions, I want you to write an email to me privately. And we have internships. We have part-time positions. I would love to include you. So write to Rajiv Malhotra, 2007 at gmail.com. The one which is 2007 is my personal email ID. So write to me that you attended this event. Here is your background. Here is what you want to do. Be specific, be concrete, and I will look at it. So the question of AI ethics is very central in this book. And the problem is that in India, all the reports on AI have been top down. There's a report by Pricewaterhouse or Ernst & Young or McKinsey. They're all corporate people. They're paid by the corporate India. So naturally, they're giving you a corporate point of view that AI is going to be great. Don't worry, there'll be no unemployment. This is the corporate spin because it's up to the social scientists and NGOs to understand the bottom-up view. Nobody has gone to the villages, the panchayats, to study what the impact will be on them. There aren't people doing research at the state level. Why aren't states initiating their own study on AI impact? It's a huge thing coming their way, like a huge tsunami. Why are they just sleeping? Why are they waiting for someone else? Every state should do its own study, and they should go down to the village level, to the district level. They should look at what are the industries in their particular state, what makes livelihood, what and how that will be impacted. How will it impact every single occupation in their state? They should do that. So this business of understanding the values and the ethics, at the social level, which is the theme of my book, has to be done bottom up and has to be done starting from the most vulnerable people in society. It should not be corporate India, Sensex India, with their FDI worrying about foreign investments. Some venture capitalists, mostly American venture capitalists investing most of the money in Indian AI, by the way. It's not a small portion of the money invested in AI startups is Indian. Most of it is foreign venture capitalists. And when that company is successful, they buy it out. It becomes part of Google or something. So India has not really taken this whole matter seriously. So I think the question is a very important one. The studies on AI, how to benefit from AI, because AI has got a lot of beneficial qualities and it has got a lot of harmful qualities. All of this should be studied from the point of view of the bottom of society. And this is why I want to educate our MPs. I want to educate the people in Rajya Sabha. I don't think they know all of this stuff. Our literary festivals don't talk about this. They're talking about all kind of stuff, this scandal and who's to get some FIR. Some manthan goes on about some attack on this fellow, some rape over there. India is dealing with short-term, tactical, day-to-day sensations and squabbles and fights and divisiveness, but is missing the big picture that we as a collective nation are losing the war, the big war. Okay, so if ship is leaking, okay, and you're squabbling about which department gets to do this and who gets to do that while the whole ship is leaking, that's pretty serious. So the ethics have to put the spotlight on the interest of the villagers, the interest of the bottom 500 million people of India. Bottom 500 million people of India, such a massive society. I consider them to be seriously at risk. And I think that you can turn it around in a sequel to this book, and I won't give out the secret now, but in a subsequent book, which I've almost finished writing, I'm talking about how India can actually leapfrog ahead and how it can use its own traditional values, how we can use our traditional values in AI, do some path-breaking, game-changing, breakthroughs in AI, which will help the whole world of AI and also move India forward, way ahead of anybody else. It's like John F. Kennedy wanting to put man on the moon within the same decade. It's that kind of a vision I have, but I'm not giving it away in this book because I'm disappointed when I've shared far-sighted ideas. I have been disappointed with the people who take these ideas and run around here and there to become personally very famous very quickly, but that has not helped the society as such, and it has fragmented the energy that should have been put together and used in a cohesive way. Since I'm disappointed, I've had bad experience. Therefore, this time around, I'm very careful what I share, when I share, and with whom I share.
And how are the Breaking India forces using AI and how are they using it to exploit the civilizational ethos?
People ask me, what does this have to do with your previous work? Okay. And this kind of question comes up and it shows how ignorant our people are. How ignorant. And these are the people that you, the society, have counted on as sort of big netas and big leaders, and whatever they say gets quoted, and people go running to subscribe to their channels. Come on, people with 5 times, 10 times, 50 times as many social media followers and all that as I do. I'm surprised and shocked at how ignorant they are and how obsolete they are in terms of where the battlefield is going into the future. So when I wrote about Breaking India, I was writing about it in the year 2000. It took, and by the year 2005, I had a lot of papers out. And in 2010, 11, 2008, I started writing actually the book. So that defined a past decade or more of the discourse. I'm telling you that the same people who jumped on that bandwagon now need to jump on this other bandwagon because they're obsolete. And the foolishness is that you, the followers, you, the society, you, the Aam Aadmi, are going to go clamoring after them again. But you need to understand the entire Hindutva activism crowd is obsolete. The entire Hindutva discourse on what we need to do to reclaim our history, to reclaim our identity. All those are things I champion. I know that. But I'm saying that that entire discourse, including my own discourse, my own book, Breaking India, are obsolete. My books, the books I've written in the past are superseded because this takes it to the next level. So what is happening to Breaking India forces, I will not disclose fully. Because just like when I wrote the book Breaking India, I infiltrated many, many nexuses all over the world. I infiltrated seminaries, church groups, think tanks. I quoted some of those in my Breaking India book, European groups, American groups. I infiltrated. I had my team go become member here, there, join this conference, sit in this seminar. All of that I did for many years. I've been doing that for this now. I've been doing that for this space for the last 5 years. I don't want to jeopardize my sources, but I have a lot of information which will shock you. It will shock you when you find out how the Breaking India forces are jumping ahead to the next generation and we are sleeping. Our side is sleeping because we are fighting Breaking India 1.0 and the other side is developing Breaking India 2.0. And this Breaking India 2.0 is going to turbocharge the Islamists, the Indian left, the Maoists, the church people, and many new kinds of Breaking India forces. And they are established in international nexuses. Not only the old Breaking India forces getting upgraded, but entirely new ones coming up. Entirely new ones coming up. Some from China also, Breaking India forces. So I'm not going to give you the data, partly because I want you to first understand this book and do justice to this book before we move on to the next book, and partly because I don't want to divulge my sources, because I'm on to gathering a lot of information on what these Breaking India 2.0 forces are doing against India, particularly. They're doing it globally, but what those BI forces, they're also breaking Sri Lanka, and they're breaking Africa, or whatnot. They're involved in various ways, but what are they doing specifically to India in very tangible, concrete ways? I'm on to building that map of what they're up to. And you will hear from me in the months ahead. Thank you. Thank you, and namaste to everybody.